Hello, everyone, calling all jazz fans out there. This is a new episode of the Jazz Flashes podcast. My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez, and I'm talking to you live from the small town of Martin in the state of Tennessee in the United States of America. And this podcast will be available on my YouTube channel, Anton GF, as well as on Jazz Flashes, the blog about jazz that I write and that you can find at jazzflashes.blogspot.com. And about a year ago, we talked to a good friend of mine who joined us from New York City. That was a year ago, and now a year later, and several podcast episodes later, he's back, and it's always wonderful to get a chance to chat with him. He's just put out a new album called New York City Jazz, and he has traveled all over the world bringing jazz to different cultures and different countries, over 50 of them. And he's one of my favorite jazz musicians of the present day, one of the best saxophonists out there, and his name is Chris Byars. Chris, thank you very much for answering our call here on the Jazz Flashes podcast.
Thanks for that intro, Anton. You're too generous, as usual, as you were the last time around. Hello to all the listeners, and I want to say it's April 30th, Jazz Appreciation Day today. And I want to be especially mindful to thank everyone and express my gratitude for your interest in the music, because without you guys, it's just a concept. We're not supposed to just put out stuff and not have it heard, and we love your feedback. We love the attention, of course, but I think the music is played better when it's going to the right ears, and we need you. So thank you. I appreciate you guys.
Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you also for this fantastic album that was released just a couple of months ago or so, not very long ago. It was recorded, though, in December of 2016, and the title of the album is New York City Jazz. It was released on SteepleChase Records, with whom you've been you've been recording for quite a long time. We've talked about other albums that were released on that Danish label. Now, this one, Chris, is called New York City Jazz. Could you talk a little bit about that title? What is New York City Jazz like?
Okay, well, you know what? I'm going to tell you about the title, but I got to give you a little bit of history on how this has all come about. It takes a while to get into the inner circle in my group, years. So you got to play at the sessions, you got to keep running into me, and you got to be really, really good. And there's been a change since this record. Now, this sextet that you see on this record, I thought that's going to be it. These are the guys, the only people I need, for here to eternity. But specifically, Pasquale Grasso, the guitarist, he got an offer he couldn't refuse from Sony Records. So, the deal is like SteepleChase and Sony Records are two different animals in the ecosystem of business, basically. And, art and business do relate unless you are one of two things. If you're an amateur or if you're independently wealthy, you can avoid having to deal with business. But I'm neither of those things, so I'm a subject of this, interaction with the business world. Well, Sony is a big, predator shark out there, and SteepleChase is a nice little, medium-sized fish. So one can't, SteepleChase can't compete with Sony. Sony came along and said, Pasquale Grasso, you're a great guitarist. We want you to, record for us now. And when we did my latest record, by the way, there's with SteepleChase about a year, as you mentioned, about a year delay in the pipeline of production. And this is because as a medium-sized fish in the ecosystem, he doesn't have a staff of people editing and doing the liner notes and photos and everything. He kind of puts it together himself, and I think he does a great job. But this is not Sony Records, which can just pump the stuff out. So what happened with this CD was this was like the end of an era, the New York City Jazz. My band has changed. So if you like Pasquale Grasso, you've got to check out this record. And it's even more important because the stuff he's doing for Sony is solo guitar. And it's very strange. It's like they broke up the band. Sony, came along and said, you guys can't play with Pasquale, and Pasquale can't play with anyone else. He's got to go in a room by himself with a mic and play. So, I love him to death, and well, I'm sure his stuff is going to sound great solo. But here he is with a band. Here he is with a great rhythm section, playing on great tunes. He's taking a solo on every song except the ballad "Dawn in the City," which, by the way, came out quite well. He's you're not going to hear him like this for a while. He's a great ensemble player. He's playing figures in there with the horns and just tearing it up. So yeah, it's New York City jazz, and that's a kind of a snapshot of like what we were going for at the time. But that's the video, the motion. Where this is like the end of a chapter in my career. So, and I'd love to talk to you about where we went since then too. That's very interesting. But this record, I mean, I look back on it. It's things ain't what they used to be, and I'm very proud of how it came out. But if you're a Pasquale Grasso fan, this is a must. You got to check this out. When you're going and buying the Sony record, get this one too.
He definitely does a great job on the album, as does the rest of the band. This album is recorded in a sextet setting with yourself, Chris Byars, on alto and flute, John Mosca on trombone, Stefano Doglioni on bass clarinet, Pasquale Grasso, as you mentioned, on guitar, Ari Roland on bass, and Stefan Schatz on drums. Tell us a little bit about the band, since you're telling us that the band has changed now, that you are doing something slightly different now. Tell us a little bit about this band and how the band has changed in the last year or so that we haven't spoken, Chris.
Sure. Well, two big changes. One is my drummer, Stefan Schatz, moved to Seattle. I love him dearly, but his family got an offer he couldn't refuse, and he is doing quite well out there. It's a smaller pond, so he's getting a lot more attention, and I'm glad for that. It's hard being in New York because you walk down the street and you trip over a great musician just about every 5 minutes. So I miss him dearly, but we replaced Stefan with Phil Stewart, who is a longtime associate of mine. I've played with him since the late '90s. So again, like to get in the inner circle, it takes a while, and you got to be really good. Phil kills it on the new record. The other change is, Pasquale is such a phenomenal guitarist, and without offending any other guitarists out there, please forgive me, it's hard to replace Pasquale with another guitar player. He's on the level of a kind of a freakish talent like Art Tatum. So imagine if you're playing with Art Tatum and you say, okay, well, we can't have Art Tatum anymore. Who do we get? My recommendation is don't get a piano player. Do something else. And so what we did with the new group is we got 4 horns, 2 rhythm. We replaced Pasquale, the chord player, with Zaid Nasser, the alto saxophonist. Zaid's been a colleague since the early 90s. So we're going on, 25, it's going to be 30 years at some point. And the music really changed for the new record. And again, I'm not talking about New York City jazz, I'm talking about the next record. It is completely different because we have nobody comping for us. And there's a lot of horn backgrounds, there's a lot of horn writing, and the texture has changed. This I think they call it heterophony, when there's just like, I forget. I better go back to music school and learn the terms for textures. When you have an ongoing continual of accompaniment, it just adds little comments of where you are harmonically. It reminds the audience of the structure. We don't have that, so you have to get it from the harmony parts of the horn players that are not soloing, and that's a very different assignment for the listener. To top it off with the new record, I didn't want to do any more Gigi Grice, Freddie Red, Lucky Thompson songs. It's all originals. So when you're playing all originals, you really need to define the tune because nobody knows that it's, all the things you are or something. I mean, you have to give them a lot of backgrounds and a lot of leading tones in the horns, the background horns. So it's a totally different way of playing jazz, just because of Sony Records, because Sony went and gobbled up my guitar player. So I'm very excited about that too. Now, Anton, I didn't ask you before the interview, but I wouldn't mind putting on a rough mix, sending you a sample of this so your listeners can check it out, just for the difference of what happens when you replace a guitar with a saxophone. But it's like the greatest thing that's happened in 2018 for me. Actually, if you can believe it, all of the songs, I wrote 10 songs for the new record and 3 after the record was recorded. They're all from 2018. I wrote 13 new compositions this year for this new band. So I'm just having like a great sort of creative spurt as a way to deal with my tremendous loss of my virtuoso sideman. So how's that? That's kind of a long answer.
No, that sounds good. It makes me want to, fast forward to when that new album is released, so I can actually hear it. And definitely, when that one comes out, I'd love to talk to you again at length about that new album. Do you already have a title for it or a release date for it?
No, we don't have a title yet. I got to sit and meditate about that. It might be one of the song titles or something. But yeah. It's going to take another 8 months or something, but I'm very proud of that. But I'm very proud of this one too, and I think it's important to check this one out to see how it changes into the next one, because you really have to listen differently, and listening is the coolest thing we do as humans. It's people think the glory is in the playing, but it's actually in the listening, because you can sit in Carnegie Hall and have the greatest orchestra playing for you, and if you're not attentive, you'll miss it. It takes real discipline to sort of take it, to absorb it, to have the openness. You can't have any ego. How do you know what's going to happen? You don't know what's going to happen. You have to be present for it every moment. It's a lot of being in the moment involved. Your life experience goes into every second. It's such a hip thing. So I think it's good for the listeners to check out both records, this one and the next one.
Well, going back to this one that I have in front of me, New York City Jazz, released on SteepleChase Records out of the country of Denmark. I would like to ask you quickly, Chris, what was the concept behind this album? We have some originals that you wrote. We have some Gigi Grice material. We have some material from Freddie Redd, from Tarek Abdel Hakim. What was the unifying concept behind this album?
Well, thanks for asking that. It has to do with the album title, which is that there is a locational component to music. It has to do with going out every night and sitting in or playing a gig with people I think memory is involved in a lot of listening and playing. And actually, I heard the other day that walking is a lot about memory. You are not recording where you're going most of the time. You're like a blind person would. You know where you're going already. So it's like this with music. The more familiar you are with what someone's going to do, the more you're expecting it. And when they do it, you can appreciate not the fact that it's a news event that somebody played, the end of 3 at that moment. You can start appreciating how they played the end of 3, because it's not a surprise that they did it. You can savor it more. So that's an elemental molecular explanation of a very big thing, which is there's a scene in New York. It's been going on for 80-something years. And hey, look, I'm not going to pretend that I'm as good as the guys came before me in the 50s, 60s, 70s. But I am here, and I pay the rent here, and I go out. I went out last night. I'm going out tonight. And there's something to that. And when we play, the people you're listening to are part of that New York scene. The sidemen are either 20, 30-year associates of mine, or they, like in the case of Pasquale and Stefano, moved here because they wanted to be a part of this, and they had been a part of it for 6 or 7 years now. And it doesn't take that long to really become a part of it. I'd say after a year, you start to adjust your time, feel, and intonation, and you sort of zero in if you're a quality musician like they are. So that is the playing style. It's also the repertoire. Now there's a kind of a wrinkle in that because 2 of the songs are from the Middle East, right? So what's the point of that? How is that New York City jazz? Well, the point is very few of us are actually from New York, initially going back generations. Everyone's come here. And so actually to be a part of what's here, you have to have something that's not from here. Like in the case of my Italian sidemen, Stefano and Pasquale, as in the case of these 2 songs, the general song from Saudi Arabia, No Message from the Gulf, the Persian Gulf, it's part of New York, that it's international, that it's always, something flowing through, the way New Orleans was 100 years ago. So yeah, that's the concept behind New York City jazz. It's giving to the listener the setting of where we're coming from.
You're listening to the voice of Chris Byars, joining us from New York City, and this is a new episode of the Jazz Flashes podcast. My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez, and this podcast will be available on YouTube and also on Jazz Flashes, my jazz blog, very soon. It's always a pleasure to talk to Chris, particularly when he has put out a new album like this one right here, New York City Jazz, released on SteepleChase Records out of Denmark. I know that you're a little bit in a hurry because you have stuff to do today, so I would like to talk a little bit while we have time about the tunes on this album right here that I have in front of me. The album is bookended by 2 songs by Gigi Grice, and we've talked about Gigi Grice before, about a year ago when we did our first chat here on the Jazz Flashes podcast. Tell us a little bit about these 2 Gigi Grice tunes and whether you really did this on purpose to start and end with 2 Gigi Grice songs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is part of my story for sure. I love Gigi, how he had a couple of other things that he did for everyone, besides playing great. By the way, if you don't know Gigi, check him out. And I have a theory that he and Paul Desmond actually sound very like cousins. There's something very similar. So if you like Paul Desmond and you haven't heard Gigi, you're missing out. But Gigi did two really big things that in my estimation, make him a hero. One was that he really took up the fight for composers' rights and safeguarding composers like Horace Silver and Benny Golson and people in that sort of late 50s explosion of new music that was going on. Well, there were a lot of these big shark record companies that would love to gobble up the intellectual property rights and have you sign away the publishing to the cousin or nephew of the record label owner, and say, yeah, that guy wrote the tune, not you. And Gigi was a big-time influence in sort of, getting the word out. Read the contract. Don't sign it. If you want a publishing company, sign with me, and I will get you your royalties. So in that way, he was really an artist advocate and in my opinion, a civil rights advocate, too, because these were black composers. It was the late 50s. The civil rights era hadn't really hit, and these people were being taken advantage of. So he struck a good step forward for a lot of talented, important people. The other thing he did was, after the record companies really got sick of him doing that and basically ran him out of town, he devoted the rest of his life to public education and, taught in the Bronx in an elementary school. He had to do it undercover because these nefarious types were after him, and they literally ran him out of town. They, got the message to him, don't show your face around here again or else you're going to get hurt. This is not confirmed because no one will go on record with it, including me. I don't officially know that. But I talked to Jimmy Cleveland, and he said, yeah, something like that definitely went down. So he was hiding out in the Bronx under an assumed name, and was I interviewed him in the course of doing a project on his work at the school where he taught, which was changed to his name posthumously. They call it the Gigi Grice Bashir Qasim School. That I interviewed former students and teachers that were colleagues of his back then. They said that he wasn't just the best music teacher, he was the best teacher they ever had. And this is South Bronx near Yankee Stadium. The kids had nothing in the 70s. They couldn't rub two nickels together. And he gave them all kinds of pride and expectations. And I'm sure he saved lives. So that's two huge things he did. When I play his music, I think about it, that's the person, who wrote these tunes. That was capable of all of those changes that he helped bring about. So yeah, those are two fun tunes. Transfiguration is based on Gone with the Wind. So if you're playing Gone with the Wind a lot and you're sick of it, the melody, play his melody. It's a lot more fun. And then the last tune, Bee Gees Holiday, I believe that's Benny Golson, not Benny Goodman, is a tune that is a little challenging. It's his own. He wrote the chords on that, and it's fun to play. But good luck memorizing it because it's got a lot of twists and turns.
And I agree with you, Chris, that Gigi Grice was a man that far transcended music and went into many other really important realms, and education and civil rights, things that we need to care about. And if you know the music of Gigi Grice, you definitely have to check out a book by a common friend of ours, Noel Cohen, called Rat Race Blues. And you got the oral history right there. It's a book that I absolutely love on Gigi Grice, called Rat Race Blues. I'll say it again because I really recommend it to everyone out there, whether you know Gigi or not. If you know him, you'll love the book. If you don't know him, you'll want to listen to his music after you read that book. Or maybe while you read
Rat Race Blues, The Music and Life of Gigi Grice by Noel Cohen and Mike Fitzgerald. That's the full credit there. And by the way, Noel would get mad at me for saying that about the mafia thing. So, sorry, Noel. That's just my theory.
Now, next here, there's a tune called Dawn in the City by Freddie Redd. And Freddie Redd is a man that you know pretty well in person yourself. And this is one of my favorite tunes on the album. It almost sounds to me, I don't know if you agree with this, maybe not, because, my theoretical knowledge of music is obviously lacking. I know what I like and what I don't like. But this sounds to me a little bit Dawn in the City, like a little tone poem.
It's so lovely. And I got to say, I rescued this one. I did a little deep sea diving and brought this one to the surface. This was buried in a piece called San Francisco Suite, which really is a special suite. And so imagine this. Freddie played... Freddie's not the greatest, although he's a great composer, he's not the greatest, sheet music guy. He's not into sight reading Chopin etudes. And nevertheless, put together a 15-minute suite of an amalgam of tunes, a combination of tunes, and it's straight through. There's all kinds of little interludes. There's this recurring theme that comes back, and it's dedicated to San Francisco. I asked him a couple years ago, Freddie, why'd you make the San Francisco Suite? And he said, well, when I got there, I loved it so much, I couldn't just write one tune. So he does this thing, and I've done it too, actually. I did the Riverdale Suite, and I did a suite for Cologne, Germany, where he details a walk around the city, and this is called Dawn in the City. It's after he's been up all night. And he's before that he's got kind of bluesy shuffle in the after hours joint, and there's a walk through Chinatown. Anyway, he happens on this, and you can see the sunshine hitting the Golden Gate Bridge. It's just so beautiful, and Freddie's capable of that. He's capable of capturing real honest, beautiful moment and transmitting it candidly, simply to you, the listener. So I really love this, but it was sandwiched in the middle of a suite, and like he didn't blow on it, he just kind of put it through in a minute, and it went on to the next movement of the suite. So no one's ever played that. No one's ever really made that a ballad that you could play. And wow, they should. I mean, that's just a beautiful tune. So.
And it's called Dawn in the City.
Yeah, Freddie's birthday's coming up. He's going to be 90.
Yeah, he was born in 1928, and I hear he still lives in New York.
Would you believe he lives down the block from me at an old folks' home? So I will visit him. I don't barge on him too often because he likes his privacy. But I will go see him. I think it's May 28th or 29th, and I'll play him this tune. And he's sweet. He'll listen to that and he'll get a little tear in his eye, and then just say something really sweet. I never thought it sounded that good or something like that. He's such a teddy bear, this guy.
Well, about a year ago, we talked at length about him because of that album With Due Respect that you released, where it's an album where with his music and he plays on it, and it was a very special moment for you, and we definitely did talk about him a lot. So if you're interested in hearing more about Freddie Red, go back to that episode number 5 of the Jazz Flashes podcast.
I think. I can say to you now, that's his last record. He's done. He's retired. He's got his feet up, and he's just listening, and he's just hanging out with us now, like the way Sonny Rollins is. So that, With Due Respect, he's just storming on that. He sounds like a teenager.
Well, we also have a song here that I wanted to address before time runs out. It's one called The General Song, and that was written by Tarek Abdel Hakim. You are, Chris, a world traveler. You've taken jazz all over the world, and we thank you for that, for bringing this music to other cultures and other countries. And in the course of your travels, you met this man, Tarek Abdel Hakim. And I can't say I knew where he was, but I am really interested now. So I would like for you to talk a little bit about that song and about that man.
Well, I've got a good story about that song. It was 2008. I was on a State Department tour. It's one of the first countries I went to as a cultural envoy, Saudi Arabia, which, we've had some trouble with. There's some fences to bend there, and some gaps that we need to bridge. So one of the things our embassies do is to connect us with musicians that are cultures relevant to that scene. And so we were in Jeddah, which is the port that is closest to Mecca, sort of a New Orleans of the Arabic world. You can imagine how many people come through Jeddah on their way to do the Hajj. From Indonesia, Morocco, China. The whole far reaches of the Muslim world are walking through the streets of Jeddah, and the man we met there, this Tarek Abdel Hakim, I would be surprised if he's still alive. He must have been in his 80s, and by the frequency of this, shisha that he was smoking at the time, I don't see how it was really helping his health. We sat with him, and he started to tell us some stories, and the translator, was trying to keep up with him. And after about a couple of minutes, we said, hey, listen, we're just going to let him talk, and we're going to listen to the Arabic, okay? Maybe you tell us later what he said. Because it was just like listening to one of our mentors talk, Barry Harris or Charles Davis or, some guy, Freddie, that had seen Bird or something. And he was just going on and on with these stories, and we felt like we had a sort of a energetic connection to this guy. So that was a wonderful meeting. And at the end, we said, well, we'd love to play one of your songs. Do you have any sheet music? And he kind of got a puzzled look, and he said, yeah, I think so. He got his son to bring out a copy of this song that he had written. I never heard the song performed. I don't know what the song's title is because it's in Arabic, and if you'd said it to me, I probably couldn't say it back to you. However, we played it 2 weeks ago in Kuwait, and one of the Kuwaiti musicians came up and said, I know that song you just played. So it is a song that's around in that world. Now, we call it the general song because this Tariq Abdal-Hakim was actually a general in the Saudi army, in addition to writing songs and all the other stuff he did. He was an insane collector. He had a whole museum of strange artifacts. A very interesting person. So, yeah, it winds up being Sweet Georgia Brown. We figured that out. We could play Sweet Georgia Brown on solos. It related to the tune enough that it makes sense. And it's fun to play. It really has a different sound, as does the other one, No Message. Would you like me to talk about that one?
Yeah, in fact, that was the next thing I was going to do. It's a good segue because there's a song, the rest of the songs on the album, the rest of the tunes were written by Chris Byars, and you wrote the rest of the tunes, and this one in particular, there's one here, number 5 on the album, called No Message, and this is one of my favorites. It's also one of my wife's favorites, and I said to my wife, I'm going to ask Chris about this song because I know you like it, and it's a really haunting tune, a haunting melody, and it has this Middle Eastern feel that I hope you can address a little bit. The song's called No Message.
Okay, well, if I'm giving composer credit to myself on that is in lieu of finding the other, the original composer. I think that's kind of like saying I wrote Oh Susanna or something, Camptown Race, something from 200 years ago. So that's not entirely cool. Let's say that's a traditional song. Now I did the jazz arrangement on it and figured out how to play it. Maybe I get some kind of arranger's credit for that. So the No Message is a song that we got sheet music for while in Bahrain. It's a song that the pearl fishers would sing on the boat. And singing was an important part of their life because, they would go out on these boats for weeks at a time and, try to survive out there. If you don't do something, what are they going to do? Run? You got to do something out there besides fish and row.
A little bit like the sea shanties, right?
Yeah. So they had this. This was one song. The meaning of the song was it's kind of like singing the blues. It's like, hey, we got the letters from home, but you didn't write. What's going on back there? So it's kind of like I miss home. I miss Bahrain or wherever the originated. We're not sure who first started singing this song because up and down the Persian Gulf, it was a group of fishermen that I guess didn't belong to any one particular place. The Middle Eastern sound has everything to do with that harmonic minor, dominant 7 flat 9 kind of vibe, and it's fun. I'm very proud of how that sound came out on this particular track.
Especially that ensemble part, that keeps cropping up throughout the song. It really is distinctive, and it catches your ear, even if you were listening to the album and not really at that point paying as much attention as you should. This one really grabs your ear for sure.
Well, it's just, again, it's funny about listening and how your life experience, relates. Now, that's catching your ear because you're hip and you listen to a lot of different stuff. If you're Arabic, that's the only song on the record that catches your ear because the other stuff, it's just like, what are they doing? And then we play that and they're like, oh, I know that. So it's important to be able to do that. When we're out on the road playing for the U.S. embassies, we need to play something like that as our third or fourth song, or else they go to sleep on us. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it is a thing, and it has that sound. I'm very glad that we were able to make jazz from that sound. I don't think it's a compromise on, our ideals and, our style. We play the blues when it's time to solo. We're all playing the blues.
You're listening to the voice of Chris Byars, joining us from the Big Apple, and he just put out a new album called New York City Jazz on the SteepleChase label. And before you have to go, Chris, I would like to ask you about the rest of the songs that you composed for this album. There's several originalists on here. I like to start with one that I particularly like. It's an outstanding ballad, and I hear it has a little story behind it, and it's called Bridge of Lux.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that was part of my cologne suite, and by that I mean the city, not the perfume. It was a pretty rough time in my romantic life, as I had just sort of, when you build something up to be the greatest thing, and then you find out that it's not. You just kind of feel this cynical vibe, like what else isn't what I thought it was? Will I ever believe in something again? Fast forward to April 30th, 2018. I'm engaged. Everything's working out, so don't get too upset. Yeah, the Bridge of Locks, that's one of these points where you're walking across the bridge and you see all those blocks that the lovers have pledged their eternal, undying affection for each other and commitment. And, I'm walking over this bridge and I'm thinking, what percentage of these are no longer current, and these are the thoughts in my head, is there a guy with the lock breaking, what do you call those little those gigantic pincers that you can break through metal with? Is he on the end of the bridge? Taking $5 to cut a lock, and this was that feeling of just sort of anguish. I tried to put into a song. It's an unusual tune because there's a lot of 7/4, 5/4. I never ask my group to do that. So this is the one time I've got one song in my career where I'm writing in odd meters. And by the way, there's one other song where I have free jazz. That's 10 years ago, jazz pictures at an exhibition of Himalayan art. If you're interested in that, I think we did well in both cases because my sidemen are like tremendous musicians. But if you're expecting an album full of odd meters, I'm not your guy. I'm happy with the song. My fiance loves it, and I hate to tell her, about all the despair that's involved in this particular song because I think she's seeing it as a romantic thing. Again, we listen, and it's our own personal experience that generates some of the content. How we absorb it. I'm proud of how it came out, and but that's the backstory. It's got a kind of a dark side to it.
There's also a tune in here with lots of protagonism given to the trombone of John Mosca and the guitar of Pasquale Grasso, and it's called Chess. Do you play chess, Chris?
That's written for my son, who was a chess prodigy. He's since retired at the age of 12. There's something very logical about it, and it's based on the changes of Woody and You, which has always been like a Dizzy Gillespie special, and that means John Mosca because John Mosca is actually Dizzy on the trombone. So that's really the story, and it's for my son.
The next one called Hot Dog, and really it's a song that you take at really a breakneck tempo, at least it sounds that way. And then this song, this tune Hot Dog, which you composed, has something that keeps coming up on this album over and over again, which is bowed bass solos. Tell us a little bit about that. I love bowed bass solo, but you don't hear too many on records these days.
Right. Well, it's a tough thing to do. And all right, so Ari Rowland is a guy. He's one of the 4 events that led me to play jazz. One of them was meeting him in October of 1986. We've been playing every week since then, and he always takes Arco solos. What's hard about what he does is the Arco bass is generally easier on steel strings, like orchestral musicians have it set up. And Ari plays gut strings, which is a much scratchier yet sort of organic sound, and the process is actually harder for him than it is for us. I think the sound has a real warmth where steel strings bowed. I don't know. It feels kind of plastic to me. It's not alive the way gut strings are. By the way, 100 years ago, the great violinists all played with gut strings too. So this is actually kind of a traditional thing. Steel is an innovation in the 50s and 60s. So you don't hear it because, well, first of all, bowed instruments in jazz are not prevalent. Stefan Grappelli and some others, the sort of gypsy sound.
Joe Venuti and Stuff Smith.
Joe Venuti, Stuff Smith, they're great, but again, it's it's in the miscellaneous category pretty much of jazz. Although I'm sure about 25 people would be putting hate on me right about now for saying that. But really, I mean, compared to trumpet or something, it's just not as common. And I think that's because of the elbow machinations that have to happen. It's hard to swing, with something that is so clearly up and down. That would lead you to play more even eighth notes. So how do you play swing with, you know what I mean? Like, how do you go up bow twice as fast as you go down bow to make that happen? It's not easy. Now, Ari has a wrist technique, and he holds the bow with the German grip as opposed to the French grip. He is really the foremost Arco bass player of our time. So what you hear, it's a kind of a, it's an oddity. Because usually there's a bass. By the way, I love bass solos. I think jazz tunes need a bass solo for this kind of, it's the calm before the storm of the trading eighths or the head out or the shout chorus or whatever happens after that. You need something, you need a recession of volume, of busy content. You need this simplified thing. Of course, Ari solos are a little crazy, so it's not that simple, but just in terms of the overall activity, there's not going to be as much going on with the bass solo. And then you finish the tune with another tsunami of sound. So, some groups cut out the bass solo. I don't like that. Ari also said, he liked Arco as opposed to pizzicato, the plucked version, because he said, pizzicato for me kind of sounds like an African drum. You can't crescendo on a note once you hit it, and the attack is so boom, 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 that you don't really get a melody out of that. It sounds like something else, like a rhythmic solo. So he, from adopting this technique over the last 35 years, is able to give us a more melodic interlude in that space, and I'm very grateful for it. Again, this is not easy to replace, so I hope Sony Records doesn't come and buy him out.
Well, I share your love for bass solos and jazz, which they're more prevalent in jazz than in any other style of popular music. Maybe there are some bass solos in bluegrass here and there, but you don't really hear a lot of bass solos in other kinds of popular music. And I've always been drawn, like you, to the great bassists and bass solos that populate a lot of great jazz records, like this one right here. We were talking about Hot Dog. Now, finally, we have another song called Quick Turnaround, and that one, again, has a little bit of a story to it, because being the world traveler that you are, such a great ambassador for our country, out there playing wonderful music and all around the world. This one, according to the liner notes, is a breezy tune that you wrote after flying from Kosovo to neighboring Albania, but with a stopover in New York City.
Yeah, that's right. It's like if I had to cross the George Washington Bridge from New York to New Jersey, and I went to Russia first. Because at that point, my daughter was having a high school play. Now, in retrospect, this is a few years ago that I wrote that. That was the biggest moment of her drama career. She's not acting anymore. So if I had missed that, I would have missed the story, I arrived, she had a Friday night show and a Saturday night show. I arrived in time to make the Act 1 of Friday, and I had to leave during Act 2 after her big number of the Saturday. So it was perfectly timed. but so inconvenient, mileage-wise. My goodness, Kosovo and Albania, you could walk from one to the other. Yeah, as I was sitting in the airports, I said, well, my daughter's this special. How can I commemorate this moment? Let me write her a tune. So really that song just has, her essence on it. To me, as a listener, when I hear that, I go, that's my daughter. I also want to point out, I love the ensemble parts of that song to hear how Pasquale fits into the other three horns. And so, you guitar player fans out there, check him out. He's got the blend. He's, listening. It's not, three horns and Jimi Hendrix. It's like four horns.
You've mentioned your family a few times during our conversation. How hard is it to put together your professional life and your family life as a traveling and touring musician, Chris?
Well, I think it's hard for everyone else. I'm very lucky, to have a family and to have a career that is interesting, that I love. The career isn't easy for me, but to have, all right. I mean, I could say it's hard, but I'm very, very lucky that it's even a possibility. I think it takes a lot of, tolerance and appreciation on everyone else's part to understand, that there will be sometimes Daddy can't come home from Albania to hear your show. Or you might have to sit through a gig, where you'd rather be home on the couch watching your favorite show. This is the reality. Many musicians have done it. Jazz kids are very special because they get exposed to this kind of thing. I was not a jazz kid. Zayd Nasser was a jazz kid. His dad was Jamil Nasser, great bass player for John Coltrane, Ahmad Jamal, and B.B. King. And Zayd's a special guy. I mean, he's just got a different way of looking at the world. So I've got two jazz kids out there. I don't think they'll be musicians, but they still bring that, sort of experience to their world. And it's what I've got, and I'm not going to complain about it. I feel very lucky.
Well, I totally agree with you there. I don't know if my daughter will be a musician or not, but I get a thrill every time she listens to some jazz on the TV or something that sounds like jazz to her 5-year-old mind, and she says, "Daddy, that's jazz, that's jazz," and she knows about it. I think that's wonderful, and that comes from the jazz that she listens to at home, not the jazz that I played, because I don't know how to play, but I play the records, and I think it's important to further the legacy of this great music in the 21st century.
So many of my colleagues have said that they got it at home first. So that's very important. And to all the listeners out there, play jazz for your kids. As Mercedes Ellington, who by the way is a jazz kid, said yesterday at a concert I did with her, you got to get kids involved with music because it will keep them out of trouble. When music isn't in their lives, what's going to take its place?
Chris Byars joining us from New York City. We're winding down the conversation because he has a record date, and we can't stand in the way of that for sure. To finish, Chris, I'll give you a chance to tell everybody out there that may not have heard this album yet, as they purchase this album, whether they download it or they buy it on the physical CD, which is what I always try to do because I still like the CD and the liner notes and all the information about the personnel and all that sort of thing. But that's just me. I know not everybody out there agrees with me these days. But anyway, you buy this album, what will people find in New York City Jazz, your new album on SteepleChase Records? And finally, also, if you can, tell us a little bit, very quickly, about your plans for the near future.
Okay, so I think the record is a good snapshot of where we are in New York City. You've got the great Pasquale Grasso in perhaps his final recording with me, and a lot of classic New York repertoire. as well as original compositions. If you're wondering what is New York like, this is going to give you a pretty darn good clue as to not only 2018 but the time that came before. So yeah, I would love it if I recommend the physical CD, and if you want to rip it and put it on your devices, that's great. But SteepleChase goes through a lot of trouble to make the best quality audio, and when you compress it to an MP3, you're getting a tenth of the information. The soft parts are, it kind of falls apart a little bit, and the loud parts aren't as loud, and tone quality isn't as good. I feel bad for people, for example, falling in love to Coleman Hawkins on an MP3. I fell in love with Coleman Hawkins on an LP. It's so much better. So try the CD. But if MP3 is what you can do, that's fine. For downloading, we need customer reviews. Please just if you can write a sentence or something to let other people know this is something that you dig, or feedback. It helps me too, so that I know what you like. So if you're doing the iTunes or Amazon thing, don't be a stranger. And as far as upcoming plans, I'm really excited about this. The four-horn to rhythm band. And I look forward to you guys checking out Zaid Nasser. I've moved over to tenor, or I should say back to tenor, and Zaid is doing great on alto. That's going to be really fun. We have a gig at Smalls coming up May 13th. If you want to check out the live stream, that's a good way to hear the music as it's happening. I'm probably going to write another tune between now and then.
New York saxophonist Chris Byars, and if you want to find out more information about him and his music, you can go to Chris Byars, BYARS.net, and you'll find also some information about him and his records and his appearances there on chrisbyars.net. Well, Chris, I know it's been a little rushed, but I'm not going to stand in your way of your record date for sure. It's always a pleasure to have you here on the Jazz Flashes podcast. When you release that new album that you're so excited about and that we are excited about already, please let me know, and we'll chat maybe with a little bit more time, a little bit more in depth about the changes on to the lineup and to your sound and that new record. And more important than that, congratulations on this album, New York City Jazz, and congratulations also on your engagement.
Thank you. That's the really big project. Listen, Anton, just a quick parting thought. Happy Jazz Appreciation Day to you, your family, and to all the listeners. I thank you for everyone's participation. You're all very special, and this is about community. It's not about an isolated experience. So, join in the fun. Put your comments up online. Come out to the clubs. Participate in any way you can, because that's what makes it all worthwhile. Generally, the people in the jazz business are very special, and so why not get involved and hang out and have fun?
Well, and thank you, Chris, for the music, because without the music there would be no podcast. The music comes first and the podcast comes later, so I really appreciate it. The album, again, is New York City Jazz by Chris Byars with John Mosca, Stefano Doglioni, Pasquale Grasso, Ari Roland, and Stefan Schatz out on SteepleChase Records just a few weeks ago, out of the beautiful and great country of Denmark. This has been a new episode of the Jazz Flashes podcast. My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez, and our guest today has been Chris Byars. The episode will be available on my YouTube channel, Anton GF, and very soon also on jazzflashes.blogspot.com. That's jazzflashes.blogspot.com, the blog that I write about jazz. The copyright is mine as always, year 2018, recorded live in the small town of Martin, Tennessee in the United States of America. Thank you again, Chris, and thanks everybody for their attention. And as I always say, keep listening to jazz, to good jazz, because as the Duke said himself, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. Thank you, and till next time.